All right, we got a audio edition of the Family Movie Time podcast, The Straight Story by David Lynch from 1999. It's actually a Disney movie directed by David Lynch. To just mention some trivia, when asked why he decided to direct a movie like The Straight Story, which would seem very different from the rest of David Lynch's films, he said that when he read the screenplay for the first time, he felt such a strong emotion that he decided to be the one responsible to try to bring that emotion to the screen. This film is based on a true story, and the real Alvin Straight, the lead character in the movie, lived from 1920 to 1996, and after he took this journey from Iowa to Wisconsin to see his brother, he lived another 3 years. The movie was filmed in sequence. At the time, Richard Farnsworth was the oldest Academy Award nominee for Best Actor in a leading role at 79 years old, and this record was broken by Anthony Hopkins in 2021 at the age of 83. My guest today is Matt, and
hello.
The movie's, like I said, is from 1999.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters when I would have been 9 years old, I guess. I imagine it was my dad's intention to see it. He's a big David Lynch fan. My mom was probably like, it looks cute. It doesn't look weird or creepy. I'll go see it, and I just happy to go see a movie. But yeah, it definitely David Lynch and Disney are not a combination. An in-house Disney too, not some studio conglomerate that Disney owns, but Disney hired David Lynch to direct a movie.
What did you feel like? I mean, looking at my own notes, it's like the cinematography first, like the image, the photography of the sky. We have a couple thunder, lightning storms. Of course, it's a road trip movie, so there's a lot of exterior shots, and Alvin is riding this mower, basically on like the shoulder of the road. So, how is this film different than other road trip movies, do you think?
Your observation is very accurate that there's a lot of sky sequences. The movie opens with almost like a Star Wars Warp Speed-esque stars flying at you. And I noticed that every time they cut from Act 1 to Act 2, Act 2 to Act 3, they cut to a shot of stars flying by you, and then the movie ends with that. So a lot of clouds in the movie, a lot of I don't know how unique this is to this movie, but road trip movies, you got a lot of really wide shots. We observed that it has a very wide aspect ratio, which I believe is a metaphor to this idea that he's getting from point A to point B, albeit very slowly. What
were you most surprised with the way the story developed?
Well, it's a true story, and you always have to wonder what was written for the movie. Like, he meets this young woman that's a runaway and talks. The second we saw her, I'm like, A, she's a runaway. Not because I remembered, I just assumed, and B, he's gonna talk her into going home, and I was dead on. But
talk her into going home, back home,
yeah, and I don't know. I wonder if he actually met that woman in real life, or if that was something. And the all these people that he met along the way. I mean, I'm curious to what degree it's fabricated, but it was still a very sincere story, and it was simple but complex when it needed to be, and yeah, I don't know.
The daughter of Alvin Straight,
Hmm.
the Sissy Spacek character, Rose, I think is her
Rose,
name.
yeah.
She's an interesting character. Like, you kind of learn, I guess, halfway through the film that she has some kind of disability, and she had kids of her own, and they were taken away. There was a fire. I mean, there was like all this really kind of heavy life stuff that she experienced, and
Hmm.
it's an interesting character, and he lives with his daughter, and it's almost like you get the sense that that's kind of his life now, is living with her, and I
Getting
feel
his welfare checks.
yeah. And Sissy Spacek's performance as the daughter, I think, yeah, like as impressive as Richard Farnsworth,
Hmm.
or as convincing, and I think similar to disability, like the fact that Alvin, he needs like 2 canes to walk, and
Oh yeah.
it's almost like it is the idea of like aging into disability. Like, you get so old you can't really walk,
Mhm.
or your hearing goes, your vision, like all these different physical things. So the theme perhaps of aging, getting older in the movie. What do you feel about that? Did that occur to you, or do you feel like that's a theme in the movie?
Yes. God, my parents are like his age, which really freaked me out because he's this man that his hips are giving out, and he's probably has early lung cancer, I think they said, and I'm like, that's scary. But yeah, I mean, he ages literally and figuratively. He ages into this old man, but he also matures in a shorter amount of time, and the brother he hasn't seen in a long time has gotten old since they've seen each other. They sort of throw in like a World War II thing, like halfway through the movie. You don't even think of him as a veteran just because it never comes up. But then he meets some fellow. What do you call them? The greatest generation is that what their generation's called? Yeah, and they just talk about all the years that have passed, and age is definitely a element to the movie.
And the casting of all these old timers,
Yeah.
like, they seem like, a lot of them probably weren't even professional actors. Maybe.
The younger people too, the Olsen twins.
Yeah, there's these like mechanic guys that are called the Olsen twins that at first, I don't know if the guy was making a joke that the Olsen twins were mechanics, but that was like an interesting choice for their names.
Yeah, I think a lot of the actors were casted locally from non-actors, and I like when movies do that. If you can find good enough people that are actually good at acting, I think it adds a level of sincerity to the movie.
And being filmed in Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
and like being filmed where it's supposed to have taken place, I think is really cool.
Which probably has very little film institution for filmmakers, there probably isn't really infrastructure for filmmakers out there.
The lighting, I feel like there's so many close-ups of Alvin's face, and it's like his eyes are very well lit, almost like sparkling. And a lot of close-ups, like Sissy Spacek's face, and I really enjoyed the nighttime scenes, the way they were lit, and the way they did like the rainstorms at night.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was any kind of really dramatic moments, you would always hear about them off screen. Like in the beginning of the movie, we hear Alvin fall before we actually see him shown on screen. And then later on in the movie, the car that hits the deer, I guess the deer ran in the road, you know, suddenly, and the car hit it, and we only hear it off screen. You mentioned David Lynch did the sound design.
Yeah, I just happened to see that in the credits. I mean, this isn't a Star Wars movie. It doesn't have a substantial amount of sound design, but what it had was nuanced, and I'm sure he had to listen to 100 different tractor sounds to pick, the one that was grindy but not too grindy for what he was looking for. And yeah, I like that when an actor also, or a director also, edits their movie or does the sound design or just a random thing that they happen to be good at and want to add more of themselves to the picture.
It's interesting to note that Lynch, this was the first feature film that David Lynch did not write.
I was wondering about that.
And some other interesting trivia. Chris Farley was going to be in the movie with his brothers, but Chris Farley passed away in 1997 before he could get a chance to act in the film. The other casting potentials were James Coburn, John Hurt, Jack Lemmon, Gregory Peck in the lead role. It's kind of haunting, but I mean, Richard Farnsworth, he died shortly after the film's release, and he had been ill before they started making the movie. Also, Harry Dean Stanton died after the final episode of Twin Peaks in 2017. I think there's some Lynch regulars, like Mary Sweeney's name sounds familiar as the editor, and
I don't know enough about Lynch regulars, but I felt that the overture music was reminiscent to the overture music of Twin Peaks, so I assume that's the same person. But yeah, I don't know enough about regular Lynch collaborators.
Angelo Badalamenti did the music for The Straight Story, and yes, Badalamenti has done several Lynch movies.
Okay.
The movie was filmed in sequence. Lynch considers this his most experimental movie.
That's funny. I mean, that's a very relative statement. For him, an experimental movie is a very straight movie, no pun intended.
Even the way, like, the opening scene, the way the camera starts further back and then slowly comes in, and it has kind of that almost Blue Velvet vibe. I mean, the tone of the movie, there's at times where you can tell this is still a David Lynch movie, even though it's rated G and not rated R. And the scene with the woman who hit the deer, and she's extremely hysterical and upset and shouting and just trying to calm herself down. That to me is another reminder you're watching a David Lynch movie, because the fact that it was a sudden thing where somebody's just freaking out.
Yeah, I need to brush up on my David Lynch, but I do agree that scene was very strange and unexpected and bizarre.
I think the way like the movie, it's hard to, I guess, figure out like do you feel like a movie like this, do people still watch it, or do you feel like it is kind of is it obscure, is it more of like underseen, underrated? What's your take? Because you saw it once years ago in the theater too.
Yeah.
When I saw it, I think it was on DVD.
I imagine that big David Lynch fans would own this on DVD and watch it once a year when they go through their Lynch collection on an annual basis. But I don't feel like... I mean, this is by no means a kid's movie, but it's a G-rated movie that any kid could watch. And I don't feel like kids are aware of this movie, and they should be. I love a G or a PG movie that isn't about, talking animals and silly things. Just a real movie that doesn't have cursing or violence or nudity. And I mean, my niece and nephew are too old to watch. I don't think they're into G-rated movies, but if they were like 5 years younger, I think I would try to get them to watch this. I think they should make more movies like this that are family friendly but sophisticated and deep, really deep and emotional. And well, kids movies today are emotional, but not deep like this. And
I think it's kind of I imagine it'd be a cool movie for families to watch together.
Mm-hmm.
Like even like grandparents watching it with grandkids, and like
there is
generations.
Yeah, I was gonna say that there's a generational thing. There's, what's the main character's name?
Alvin
and his daughter, and the daughter has children. I mean, there's 3 generations right there. There's the scene where he talks about, the cliche of how easy it is to break a stick, but you bundle them together. And yeah, absolutely, this would be a good movie for different generations of family members to watch together. I think it would, kids don't probably know that much about their grandparents fighting in wars, and this movie has a lot of dialogue of war, World War II specifically, and it would create conversation, I think, yeah.
Can you think of other films that have a similar, style or vibe or energy as The Straight Story? That are still G or PG
rated? I feel like that's like a 90s thing. As I said, it's talking animals, and throughout the movie I was thinking about that. I was thinking like, what's another movie that was sophisticated and live action and a real talented director that was G or PG, and I know I've seen them. I seek them out. I love a good PG sophisticated movie, but I couldn't think of any. I feel like there was a good one in theaters in the last year, but I'm blanking on it.
You mentioned the 90s, and I think, I'll confess, a lot of the movies so far with the podcast are movies from the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something about that decade for family movies, or maybe movies in general, that is specific to that time, perhaps.
Well, 90s, I think, are considered to be Disney's renaissance. In the 40s or the 50s, they had, the original Cinderella and the original all sorts of things. And then throughout like the 70s and 80s, Disney just was not producing hits, and people were losing faith. And then bam, they had like The Lion King and The Little Mermaid and Aladdin. And what else? They just had 90s are a big time for, well, not just Disney, but kids' movies, and I might just be saying that with rose-colored glasses because I'm a 90s kid, but I feel like with television, too, there's, talk that in the 90s you had all these more sophisticated shows, and now shows are just dumb. But yeah, the 90s were definitely a good time for family-friendly content.
I guess, as you said, the contemporary landscape of family-friendly movies or content, it seems more animated, or it seems it is, as you described it, talking animals. Do you think people would, go to the theaters if there were more live-action, family-friendly movies?
I sure hope so. It depends on what the market is asking for. There may be a reason that there's not very many. They may have stopped making money. But I don't know if it's a good example, E.T. E.T. is like a sophisticated, deep, live-action, real director. But yeah, if there were more movies like this or E.T., and if I had a kid, I would definitely try to expose my kid to those kind of movies.
Do you remember what you watched growing up that you enjoyed, that you actually learned from as a kid, movies?
I liked Ernest movies a lot. I liked Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. A lot of 80s stuff. I was a 90s kid, but I was an 80s kid at heart.
How about the Flintstones?
Oh, yeah. I knew the Flintstones because it had kind of a renaissance in the 90s. They, on Cartoon Network, reran the original, and then it was perfect timing with the live-action John Goodman movies coming out. Yeah, I was pretty into the Flintstones. I forgot about that. That was a good show. I like that commercial from... It's something that they've tried to bury, but it's a meme of Fred Flintstone puffing on a cigarette, and he goes, "Oh, I love a good Marlboro cigarette." Because, back in the first 2 seasons, it was an era where it was appropriate to advertise. Or maybe that's a thing that some guy made on an AI bot. I don't even know if that's real. I don't want to be a person that assumes all memes are real, but it's something I've seen, and it's really funny. Audience should look it up.
There is some tobacco smoking in the Straight Story.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if some of it's product placement, but the names, you could see the names of the tobacco products, and Alvin smokes cigars here and there in the movie, but he does say that he stopped drinking, which was interesting.
Yeah, I felt like if this came out today, it would be PG and not G. I felt like there was tobacco smoking, there was alcohol use, and then just very haunting stories of World War II that, were unsettling. And I feel like now, bam, PG. No way could this be rated G, but...
And the fire that Sissy Spacek experienced, they have kind of this atmospheric flashback. They don't show you, the fire happening, but it's like these darkly lit shots of inside the house at night while Alvin's telling the story of the fire.
And she's looking out the window, thinking about her kids.
Yeah, that has a very eerie, haunting, maybe David Lynch vibe that you would, normally associate with Lynch.
I'm wondering if there's a connection to her thinking about her kid she hasn't seen in years, and Alvin thinking about his brother that he hasn't seen in years. Sort of a family that gets separated from a lot of different directions.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the other theme maybe is memory. Like Alvin talks about the memory of being in the war and like the young faces of his fellow soldiers, and then the memory of his wife who passed away and his other kids, which I don't know. I don't think it ever came up because he said he had like 14 kids, 7 of them lived. So he lives with Rose. What happened to the other 6 kids?
Yeah. They moved to the big city, I guess. I mean, they don't really talk about that.
So he's just like this older person with his memories, and yet trying to go, see his brother and have some kind of a reconciliation or closure or resolve stuff, because he says that they're estranged basically, and haven't really spoken or seen each other in years. And yeah, I think the role of memory, it's kind of interesting. I think as a person ages too, because you have certain memories you come back to or things you do forget.
And I think, the higher the generation, the more known for storytelling you are. And that gets back to the whole multi-generational element of the movie.
Yeah. And there's, I would say, this maybe smaller theme of like the strangers that he encounters, like the kindness of strangers, people helping him if it's like his lawnmower breaks down or he needs a place to stay, they let him stay in their backyard, and give him food, or let him camp out near the cemetery. There's this very friendly, welcoming kind of energy that he encounters along the road trip.
Yeah, he meets a lot of nice characters. I almost kept waiting for someone to not be nice. There was a scene where it's raining and he pulls onto someone's property, and they make a point with the camera angle to show a mailbox like this is someone's property, and he parks his tractor under a structure meant to keep farm equipment dry, and I'm like, oh, someone's gonna come yell at him, and that didn't happen. Everyone he met was really nice, and
yeah,
I don't know if I'm disappointed by that. I was just surprised. I felt like, I don't know if this was a movie aimed at a PG-13 or an R-rated audience. There may have been a more villainous character in there, or I don't know.
Or his struggle might have been harder and more intense and dark, or treacherous, tragic. Yeah, I think it's powerful. The real person, Richard Farnsworth, the fact that he was dealing with his health issues before they started the movie. You can kind of see it, like that he did have trouble walking in real life at that same time, so it almost adds this kind of authentic, genuine, like he's not really acting, almost in a way.
It also shows that David Lynch must really have liked his audition or really wanted him to be in the movie to make the necessary accommodations to have an actor that is struggling with their physical mobility.
And Farnsworth originally, he said no when Lynch asked him to be in this film because Farnsworth didn't like the language in Blue Velvet. So that was his initial response. However, he changed his mind, luckily, and I think the performance is quite, beautiful and just really you feel it. You feel the emotion and his kind of journey. And David Lynch, I applaud. I wish he would continue to make some more family-friendly content.
I would love to see him do another movie like this. I mean, I think years since his last movie, and people are wondering what he'll do next. But if he surprised us with another lighthearted, family-friendly movie, that would be really fun. I would definitely go and see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Any closing thoughts, or if you could tell all the Hollywood directors out there, if you could give them some advice or suggestions, what would you tell them?
I would just like to see a resurgence of movies like this. I said E.T. was another one. I want to say... I was thinking of throwing the Goonies in there, but as much as I love the Goonies, it is kind of a more aimed at kids. But yeah, I think they should take a chance on family movies that have layers and themes and good performances and live action. And I applaud David Lynch for doing something, as he put it, experimental, despite the irony of it being not an experimental movie by most standards. But yeah, I would just like to see more of these.